Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to Pivot on Hilal TV. Today I'm amongst the favorites of the favorites, and that is the youth, because I do believe that the future of our world, the future of South Africa, and basically the future of peoples all around who are looking for something better lies simply in the hands of the youth. If anything, it is the youth who have demonstrated to us that we can have hope in humanity. So with me today is Azra Sidat, who is currently pursuing a master's degree in diplomatic studies at the University of Pretoria while working part-time in research. During her stint at the University of Pretoria, she was part of the Muslim Students Association and the Palestinian Solidarity Committee, and she recently participated in the Al-Sharq Youth Forum Fellowship and is presently engaged in the ASRI Future Leaders Program, as well as serving on the MSA Union. Also with me in the studio is Tariq Lala. Tariq is a former ANC Youth League UP resource mobilizer, a former ANC Youth League UP coordinator, and former South African Union of Students ex officio member. Online, I have with me is Amir Adams, who is the chairperson of the MSA at the University of the Western Cape. Amir is also part of the MSA Union Politics and International Relations portfolio. So we have three dynamic young people with us, and I'm proud to say that at least we have a female with us, because you know the history of South Africa and the way in which Muslim women have been responded to and treated and indoctrinated, it was always as if that space did not belong to the females. So like I said, the youth, the Gen Zs are bringing the change. So with that, assalamu alaikum, and thank you for being here. Both of you and Amir online. It's wonderful to have you with us. So let's start with you, Azra. I mean, this year was a good year. You reached out and you said that the MSA Union was reinvigorating itself. It was reestablishing itself after being dormant for quite a while, but more significantly, you wanted to, restructure and bring to life the politics portfolio into the MSA, because that particular portfolio seemed to have fizzled out of the MSAs across the various chapters on the various campuses, and it couldn't have been a more important decision. What brought you to that realization, and what do you feel about that since that particular discussion?
Yeah, thank you so much, even for that introduction. I think we always hear that the youth are the future, and I think we couldn't agree more. And I think even just understanding that the youth, although we're the future, we're also the present. We're building that future in the present. So I think that's a really important thing to just take note of. And then when it comes to the MSA, like you said, MSA Union. MSA Union is basically the mother body that oversees and works with all MSA chapters nationally. So we have over 20 MSAs at campuses across South Africa. And MSA Union tries to work with all those MSAs to sort of really coordinate our efforts to unite us, so that the efforts that are happening on our campuses can grow and have a much louder, stronger voice, and also just to guide the students on the campuses as well who join these MSAs. And like you said, we went through a period where it was sort of died down, and I think it's not just MSAs. I think all sort of student activities or student organizations had that because of COVID. But I think, alhamdulillah, after COVID, students really came back to campus, really looking to do more as well, to really work with each other. So we saw MSAs on the campuses getting reinvigorated, and then that eventually led to MSA Union as well, sort of being revived. And I think I'm part of the politics portfolio, but I think it's an especially important one. And again, I think we saw a similar trend where the politics portfolio also went through sort of a lull, is currently still going through a lull, let me say that. I think we've seen, while the MSAs have sort of reinvigorated themselves and Muslim students have come out to do a lot more on campus, I think a lot of the work has still been focused on really just looking at Muslim needs on campuses, looking at sort of outreach or charity events, which is extremely important. And alhamdulillah, the MSAs have done amazing things in those portfolios. But the politics portfolio has been a little bit dead. I think we went through a period of very strong leadership when it came to politics on campuses. We saw movements like Fees Must Fall, often led by Muslim students. I think we had Vazia Hassan, Shaira Kala. So this was led by MSAs. But I think the trend we're sort of seeing ourselves in is Muslim students not wanting to get involved in politics as much anymore, which is quite worrying, because I think they've almost been able to say this doesn't concern us, which I think for us
we really need to emphasize that that is not the case at all. Politics affects all of us, and I think especially minorities at universities. I think even more so it affects us. And I think it's 100% important that we get involved in it. And not just that, I think even Islamic values would encourage us as Muslim students to be the ones who are active in those spaces. I think if there's any students who are standing up for justices on our campuses, it should be the Muslim students. And I think that's what myself and my co-head Amir are really trying to do in this portfolio, is really to get students more involved in politics, remind them of the importance, remind them of the voice that they actually have. I think going to university is not just about getting a degree. It's you being at a university comes with a privilege. It gives you a voice, and I think it's important, especially as Muslim students, that we use that.
So while we're talking about the Muslim students and the portfolios, Amira, I'd like to bring you in and just hear from you, because you in the Western Cape. Now, the Western Cape has a history of far more mobilization, far more activism, and I think Muslims generally in the Western Cape are more political than Muslims in Gauteng or in KZN. There certainly seems to be a fracture or division in terms of how we identify ourselves politically in South Africa. So what do you feel, in terms of the location, geopolitical location in which you find yourself, and the responsibility and the response by Muslim students in terms of now reinvigorating that particular politics portfolio, but also activism as is mandatory from Muslims when you're facing any issue of injustice?
Firstly, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everyone in studio and to all of the respected viewers. I would just like to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It's a great honor and privilege to be engaging in this platform first and foremost. And as Dr. Quraisha said, here in our Western Cape province, firstly, we are seen to be as the cradle of, and I'm referring now to the Western Cape province, cradle of many, many communities that has come about and of course extended right throughout the rest of South Africa. This is where Jan van Riebeeck landed, and of course our history does not start there, but it is what, many people have taught us. And even the Cape Muslim community, as we know, is one of the first Muslim communities within the entire South Africa, based on our history, as we all know. We come from a great history of struggle with forefathers of ours like Sheikh Yusuf, Tuan Guru, and as well as Reiti Mahmudullah Harun, and many who gave their life for the cause of justice and for the Muslim community to be established here in the southern tip of Africa. So, as you said, it's so beautifully placed that we here in the Western Cape have to basically follow in the legacy of those who came before us. Even when we look at the MSA itself, I am by UWC MSA, and this year, inshallah, in September, it will be 55 years since the MSA UWC was established, and also 55 years since the martyrdom of Imam Abdullah Harun, one of the great legends in our community, who of course advocated for the establishment of MSAs on every university campus. And with the leaders at that time, people like Sheikh Faik Kamildin, the current leader of one of our political parties, Al-Jamaah, Hanif Hendricks, who was the leader of the MSA by our campus at that time, they basically sought to ensure that the political spirit is infused within the Muslim student population at that time as a means of the students fighting against apartheid. And in our context today, post-apartheid, for Muslim students to be well involved in the political endeavors that is going on within our country. So in our side here, or rather at our side in the Western Cape, we see that alhamdulillah, we have to basically fill great shoes. And we have to ensure that when we are going to be of those who make political awareness, we do so not only because we are just merely trying to bring about a better dispensation for the students of our time, but we are indeed following the legacy of our forefathers. And that is what Allah Ta'ala instructs us. Inna nahnu nuhyil mauta wa naktubu ma qaddamu wa atharahum. Allah Ta'ala reminds us on the day of Qiyamah, when Allah Ta'ala will resurrect all of us, He's going to question us as to what we put forth, as well as a legacy that we're going to leave behind. Atharahum. So therefore, we as the youth of today, those who are involved in MSA, as Azra so beautifully alluded to the fact, are trying our utmost to ensure that we revive that political spirit amongst youth, not only in our campuses, but in our communities, of course, that we serve, in ensuring that we have betterment pertaining to the political dispensation. So to conclude, from the Western Cape side, we are trying our utmost to ensure, whether it be on UWC, that historically catered for people of color, as they termed it at the time, but also UCT and Stellenbosch University, which are universities currently, where our students are engaging in trying to bring about a better dispensation for the cause of the Palestinian people, as we see taking place, and the Senates that have currently, voted negatively, unfortunately, with a negative outcome rather by studies and by UCT, the great successes that has happened there. We're trying to change that paradigm shift, because those universities, of course, are known to be universities that have been coming on for a long time, since apartheid era, and have been advocating for that methodology. So among the Muslim students, we are trying to bring that push to say, look here, things can't continue the way they are, specifically here in the Western Cape province, which is a cradle of Islam and the cradle of many civilizations which has come out here from the Western Cape province. We have to be, as the Muslim students, we have to be part of bringing about a better dispensation. And ultimately, to conclude, as Azra said, it's based on the Islamic ethos. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-mu'minu alladhina yukhalitu nas wa yusbiru ala adawum. That it's better for a believer to be patient with the harms that people go through. In other words, it's better for a believer to be conscious about the reality going on around him and to be involved with the struggles that people go through, and therefore the need for us to be part of bringing about a better political dispensation.
So yeah, that is tremendous, because I mean it encapsulates everything that is necessary for a Muslim student. But more importantly, it's about matching your identities as a South African, and then of course as an individual who is looking forward to contributing towards a better country. So we're going to a break, but when we come back, Tariq, I want to pick up with you. You're not part of the MSA, and I want to know, how then do you bring your particular identity to the very organization which you represent, which is the ANC, and how does that affect perhaps your delivery and, more importantly, your commitment to the political party? But we'll see you after the break, and then we'll chat to Tariq. Assalamu alaikum. So today we have with us in the studio Azra Sidat from the MSA Union, Amir Adams, who's also part of the MSA Union, and Tariq Lala, who is from the University of Pretoria, and he is a student activist. He's also very actively involved in raising issues of social justice on the campus. And Tariq is also part of the ANC. Now, Tariq, one cannot simply argue that identity does not play a part in one's political representation, political choices, and even political involvement. So you're an Indian, you're in the University of Pretoria, and you're part of the ANC. Now, for the longest of time, the ANC was considered inclusive. Over the years, it became more fragmented. It was beginning to sideline other races and focusing more only on black cadres. And, I think many people inside of South Africa felt that it was not adequately representing the diverse population that is within us as a whole. But in the last year now, especially with the Gaza genocide, there has been a complete shift in the dynamics, in the way in which the party is representing itself, and in the way in which the party is rebranding itself. So as a student activist at the University of Pretoria, a university campus that has been largely repressive, a campus that does not allow robust political debate and participation and engagement. How do you find yourself, in that particular space, and how do you go about educating the students on the importance of political participation on the university campus, and especially now when it comes to voter turnout and voting on the 29th of May?
I think for me, having been somebody who grew up in a fairly progressive household, I've always had the opportunity to interact and to engage with various politics and to understand the sort of political space at large. And I think having done that, I must mention that I also grew up in a household that is very much ANC aligned. And in saying that, I think for me, what was important when I became active within the movement, when I became active within the space, is that I fundamentally believed in the ideas and the values. And I think your point is very valid in saying that identity is still relevant. And I think it wouldn't be fair for me to downplay the role of identity. And at the same time, I can say that for me, my experience, I've been fortunate enough to have been chosen by students within the movement, but even outside of the movement, to have led within the SRC and so on. And for me, the main reason is, again, the ideas within the organization. So it's a case of, I think, ensuring that the ideas and the ideas that I'm specifically referencing here would be that of non-racialism, non-sexism, and to be able to incorporate those ideas within my activism, within what I stand for, and within my belief system. And so I think historically, whatever may be true, my sort of contemporary interaction with the space is based on the fact that, for me, it's about the ideas that everybody's identity does have some level of relevance, and it's about reconciling between the two, being able to say every identity does deserve representation. However, identity needs to be redefined to be able to ensure that everybody has some level of relation to their leadership. And I think that's true for any student, for that matter. I think a lot of students and a lot of young people in general would look at a leadership structure and feel more comfortable to see people who look and sound like them. And that's exactly why I think it's important that whilst advancing this cause of non-racialism, we ensure that we are empowering various groups of people to feel represented by what is being
Okay, so I'm going to put a question now to all three of you, Azra, to Tariq, and to Amira online as well. And I want you all to just let the conversation flow. And part of that conversation is now we're heading towards a crunch. 29th May is certainly going to be, I think, our watershed moment, right? There is so many new political parties that have registered, that have come to the fore. We have said for the longest time that we're tired of the rot inside of the ANC and the fact that they have, in this ongoing run-up of 30 years, they have shown a lack of commitment to the population in terms of upscaling the lives, the quality of livelihoods of individuals, etc., and that it has been about this cadre, feeding at the trough, just everybody filling their own pockets. Now you have these new political parties, but we have the ANC who's shown, for the first time in a long time, tremendous leadership in taking the apartheid, the US-backed apartheid state of Israel to the ICJ. So people have galvanized around the ANC. So it's a very particular issue-based moment for the ANC. But at the same time, you have these different political parties, and many of them with good leadership, ethical leadership, integrity, individuals with wonderful ideas who can contribute positively to the development of this country. If we're choosing to vote, and we start going around all of these new political parties that have come up, are we then effectively not dividing especially the Muslim vote or dividing the minority vote, weakening the ANC, but at the same time then, and say those votes don't amount to anything, and those are lost ballots eventually, then giving power to the very parties that we don't want to come into positions of power? What is your opinion, Azra? Let's start with you.
I think that's a great introduction again there of the topic, and I think you touched on a few important things there. And I think one thing with the youth is, again, we always hear the term born freeze, but I think it does matter when it comes to the youth, because I think it's meant that the youth have actually been a lot more critical of the ANC or the ruling party. I don't think we feel the same sort of loyalty to this liberation movement, which maybe older generations might have. I think we can be a lot more critical of them. And I think a big part of that is because I think the youth really are experiencing the realities on the ground firsthand. We've had students who haven't been able to go to university. We've had the exclusions based on fees at universities. We have students who at universities who don't have food. We have even the students who are excelling at universities but then can't find jobs. It's graduation season now, and I think Amir said it as well. He's seen this with a lot of his friends. We're all celebrating, but what happens then? So I think the youth really are experiencing a lot of the challenges, which has allowed us to be more critical of the ANC. When it comes to new parties, I think, like you said, I think the youth really have been looking to parties where we see youth voices coming into play, even youth issues, which I think maybe that's something the political parties haven't addressed enough. For example, we haven't seen many political parties come out and speak about climate change. And I think the political parties are really missing out on that, because the youth really does make up a big group of the voters, yet political parties don't seem to be engaging enough with the youth and really catering to the issues that they are facing. So I think that's really important. When it comes to who to vote for exactly, and again, you play on there the minority vote and how do we go about being strategic about this. I think it is important in this election. I think a lot of people are realizing maybe they don't completely align with one party, but how can we maybe look at this strategically? I think Muslims always will vote based on principle and justice and human rights. Or as far as MSA Union goes, I think we have made it very clear that we are not supporting any single party, or we won't be telling students who to vote for. We just do want students to vote and to take a principle vote. I think that's the only advice we can give them, is vote for justice, vote for human rights. But I think that's the most important thing, more than really how we divide this vote, is really just to vote so that you're being an active citizen, and what you're going to do after that. Because I think if you vote, you're more likely then to hold the people who get elected accountable.
So Tariq, do you think that with this proliferation of parties, we're going to divide the vote and weaken the ANC?
Well, I think I'm more inclined to obviously argue in favor of the ANC as a member of the ANC myself. And in saying that, again, it goes back to why I joined the ANC. I truly and fundamentally believe that as somebody who's from the South Asian community, the Indian community within South Africa, I myself, my own experience has been that I only feel some level of relevance, not relevance, that's the wrong word, but I've been capacitated within the ANC space, and that's my anecdotal experience. And I fully understand that, for example, somebody else may feel vastly different to that. But in saying that, I think that the reason that I would say, firstly, with the establishment of a number of smaller parties, to comment on that, I think, again, I don't fundamentally believe most people who enter politics are bad people or people who want to empower themselves. I believe that the majority of people who are within most of the political parties that we see across South Africa today are well-intentioned. But in saying that, I think the actions that we need to speak to are what has happened and what will happen. And so for me, having been an ANC member for the past 5 years at least, and having been attracted to the organization and what it stands for, I think it would be impossible to say that I would disagree with the idea that, for example, the ANC hasn't made certain progress. And I think it would be wrong for me to say it's absolutely perfect, but I think it's fair to be able to say that I feel as though the ANC has made huge, significant progress when it comes to particular challenges. I mean, as a student myself, as a student leader, somebody who's led within the space, my own experiences is something like, for example, the establishment of NSFAS, which has been largely successful, and I think for me has been a huge victory that does need to be celebrated, not as a victory of the ANC, but as a victory of the people of this country. And that, I think, is only fair then for us to be able to say, okay, yes, there are a number of issues that are associated with the NSFAS system, for example, but that doesn't mean that we can't celebrate the victory that comes with a number of victories that have been made, specifically relating to student issues or other issues along those lines.
So we're almost at the end, and I want to get Amir's last word. Amir, if you can share with us just briefly, in a minute and a half, what is your opinion about this, and how do we go about choosing to vote?
Indeed, as Azra said, from MSA Union side, we are just merely encouraging students to vote, but who they should vote for, that is entirely up to them. And what we can only encourage is critical thinking of all of our students as they go and vote. We are not going to be indicating who they should vote for. I'm saying it again, because if Azra and I say so, then we'll be fired and we'll be cancelled. But with regards to that, we'll never do that. Ultimately, it has to be based on students with their own rational capacities, engaging and seeing who best to vote for. And among students, you can all do it strategically, whereby you find and inquire by each other as to who you're going to vote for, and in that way take a targeted approach when you're going to vote. And to conclude on this point, just as advice from my side, whenever students come to us to ask us who we should vote for, we would always say people who places humanity first, whether it be people locally or internationally, and of course leadership that will actually ensure that there's service within our community and there's no lack of service delivery. So in that way, to avoid the famous saying that goes that we will not have society whereby people are going to choose to rob us, because in society today in South Africa, we have those who choose to rob us, and then we have those who rob us after we choose it. We have those who choose to rob us because of crime and corruption being prevalent in society, and then you get those who rob us after we choose them. And so we want to ensure that whatever political party you vote for will not ensure that either will happen.
Thank you so much for that. So that brings us to the end of this particular segment, but we're coming back for a second discussion with these dynamic young individuals. We'll talk more about student activism. And just to conclude, I want to add on what Amir mentioned, and that is ultimately when we're choosing, we have to value or prioritize our values and ask what is fundamentally most important to me right now. I was telling my students when I discussed, student participation and activism, And the one thing I said to them was that I genuinely believe that apartheid would not come back. But after the Gaza genocide, I'm actually afraid. And I do believe that it can come back. And there are certain political parties in South Africa who very, very likely, if they are given the opportunity to come into some form of a coalition, can bring back. And when I say can bring back apartheid, I mean certain aspects of it. You will see eventually the gradual erosion of your freedoms and your rights. So when you're choosing, do you want to be in that position again, or do you value your freedom? And do you value those parties who stand by the humanity of all people? An individual, a political party who can honestly say, this is wrong and this is right. And it's not because it's based on a particular race, because it's white, it's right. We need to stand firm on that. Move away from this particular identity, this understanding that everything white is always right. So, fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.